I'm going to give you a very quick glimpse into the making of this layer cake quilt. I decided during our family quilt challenge that I wanted to make something super simple because I didn't have a lot of time to be at our family gathering. And so I ended up taking this layer cake with me, cutting on the diagonals, and then deciding that I wanted to do a quarter square triangle quilt out of it just because the fabrics were so unique. Some of the design elements in the fabric were large as well, so I wanted to make sure that people could see that. So all I did once I cut them apart was I mismatched two prints together, and I just kind of did this randomly. I didn't really pay attention to lights and darks, so some of them have two lights, some of them have two darks, some of them are just a light and a dark. But I matched all these up for all of the layer cake squares that I had, sewed them together, and ended up with a bunch of blocks. Here is just a little showing of some of the fabrics that are in it. So I did go through and sew together all of my triangles using the chain sewing method, and I did decide to press all to one side for every single block that I made. So I made sure that all of my triangles were oriented the same way, and for all of these I pressed up. Normally you'd pay attention to lights and darks and press towards the darks. That's usually the rule, but for these I just decided to press up for all of them so that I could twirl my seams in the end. So you can see on this block that I ironed all of my blocks clockwise, so I was able to do that little twirling method in the middle to reduce the bulk of the seam just where all four of those triangle points meet. This was a very repetitive process, but overall I think these blocks were super easy to make and they really didn't take a lot of time. If you're not familiar with how to twirl your seams, I did do a reel on how to do this that's a little bit more detailed, but you can kind of see my process in this still for each of these blocks. And I just think it comes out with a much nicer finish doing it this way versus just ironing everything to one side or the other. Similar to my approach when pairing up the fabrics for my blocks, I kind of did the same thing when laying this out. I just kind of did it random. I did lay it all out and I took a picture. I usually then convert the picture to black and white and see if there's too much of a dark or a light color in each spot and kind of just flip-flop around from there. And then I also just look at the quilt too and see if there's anything I don't like together that I'd like to change, but I really wanted this to be a pretty random looking quilt. After getting the quilt laid out the way I wanted it, I started by picking up pairs of blocks. It is important on these ones to nest your seams because I don't like to pin, and so because I ironed all of these the same way, which would be clockwise, all my blocks are that way. When I pair up two blocks, they are opposite, and you can see how the seams are opposite here and they nest together. You just have to slide them together and you'll feel the way that they lock. And then you just hold it nicely and sew everything together. So here are my rows all sewn together. This was a pretty quick process to do this. I did this probably in an hour or two, maybe at max. I ended up being able to lay out the quilt so that it was 6 rows by 7, which was not a very big quilt because these blocks shrunk from being 10-inch squares, and then they obviously lost some size when you did the quarter square triangle method. As I am piecing my rows together, I am not one who likes to use pins, which some people definitely frown upon, but I think I can just get it done easier without pins. The method that I use to do that is if you iron opposite ways you can lock those seams together and just kind of nest them, and then pins would not be required. I'll kind of show you where I have a lot of these pieces conjoining. You want to make sure that you nest the major seams, and then kind of where the triangle pieces line up, I always kind of go in and eyeball it, and I can kind of put them together and line them up that way, but I make sure that this major bottom seam and top seam are opposites, and then lock them into place and nest them. And then I just hold my piece taut the whole entire time while I am sewing it. So I can show you that really quick. And as I approach the triangle junction and then to where my seams nest together, I want to sew straight through all those lines, where all those lines intersect, so that I don't cut off my corners, but then it also ensures too that I get close enough to my corners so that there's not a major gap in between them as well. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this next one, and then lining that up, and also this as well. And then as I approach the end, all I have to do is line up these two seams, nest them together, and then make sure stuff lines up nicely and everything's locked into place, and then just make sure my fabric is taut as well. And again, I crimp that seam the whole entire time while I'm sewing. And I go back through and double check all of my seams to make sure that they line up. Here's one that you could definitely sew together a little bit more because there's a slight gap in it, but I am okay with that. That doesn't really bother me very much. But ideally, they should all join together kind of like that. This quilt was very quick to make, definitely could be done in a weekend, and it does not require a pattern. All you need to do is have your 10-inch squares and cut them on the diagonal. Now to go check this one off my project make bucket list. Thanks for watching.